Well, hello there everybody, and welcome back to Steven's Fight Show. Alright, so UFC 280. I've already dropped one video on it regarding the Sean O'Malley vs Petr Yan fight, and I wanted to upload this video before uploading the Jake Paul video, but because it was so close, I just had to upload the Jake Paul video first. So in this video, I'm going to break down how Islam Makhachev completely dominated Charles Oliveira. Yeah, this was a sad outcome if you're a Charles Oliveira fan. I thought Charles Oliveira was going to finish Islam, but nope, it ended up being vice versa. It's also sad because, bro, this is the first time Blonde Charles has lost a fight. Blonde Charles was meant to be undefeated, bro. And then all of a sudden, Islam goes out there and makes Charles Oliveira look like featherweight Charles.
Okay, that was a joke, by the way, okay? I actually don't mean that.
And also, did you guys see that picture of Charles Oliveira making weight with his team and everything? Like, literally, that picture looks like it could be an album cover. But anyways, enough talking about that. Let's just get straight into it. So, Islam Makhachev finished the one man that finishes everybody else. He went out there and dominated against Charles Oliveira, and I couldn't have been more wrong. He submitted Charles Oliveira in the second round, and he did Charles like how Charles did to everybody else. And my thoughts on this fight, this is obviously Islam's best win of his entire career for obvious reasons. Obviously, none of Islam's fights have ever been as big as this fight ever. He's fought people that were not even in the top 10, and then he gets a shot at the #1 contender, and he goes out there and he beats him and becomes champion. Obviously, that's going to make it the best win of his career. But for me, I felt like this was Islam's best win because he went out there and he proved that he is who he says he is. Prior to this fight, Islam showed great wrestling, grappling, conditioning, and decent stand-up, but it was against people that aren't legit contenders. We knew how good Islam was, it was just the fact that we were never able to see his skills against people that were killers in this division. He never got his opportunity to show that he was a real legitimate threat in this division. So for a while, a lot of people didn't really take him seriously. And coming into this fight, I thought Oliveira would win due to his relentless pressure, elite jiu-jitsu, his experience, his underrated striking, and his durability. Essentially, I thought Oliveira had more advantages in this matchup. However, although I was wrong about my prediction, there was something I forgot to factor into it about Islam Makhachev, and it's the fact that whenever people fight Islam, they tend to be more tentative about opening up. Look at his past fights against many different fighters. People who fight Islam tend to play it safe, and there's a reason for that. Since Islam presents a wrestling threat, it keeps his opponents occupied and hesitant, and because of that, Islam is able to mix in his striking and not take a lot of punishment on the feet. I think Islam is actually leading when it comes to not taking the most significant strikes in the octagon, and a lot of that has to do with his wrestling and his striking and his ability as a fighter. And because Islam possesses this ability, I feel like it was part of the reason why Charles didn't have as much success as he did on the feet. And again, Charles has underrated striking in my opinion, but in this fight it wasn't effective against Islam for many reasons. So let's go through the fight then. So as soon as the fight started in the first round, Charles Oliveira was coming forward, but immediately I noticed that he wasn't as reckless and he was a bit more cautious, and I felt like that came down to two reasons. The first reason being that Islam was the better striker and the sharper striker on the feet. He was actually catching Charles coming in a few times, which was surprising. That was definitely something I did not expect. And there were multiple exchanges where Islam took one step back and tried to counter Charles coming into range, and that speaks volumes about the game planning from Team Makhachev. And the second reason being that when Charles felt Islam in the clinch and when he was on his back, I think Charles knew that this wasn't going to be as easy as he thought it was going to be. And since Islam, he was great in the clinch throughout the entire fight, he was able to land knees, and he defended against knees from Charles Oliveira as well. And eventually, Islam timed a beautiful throw as Charles threw a knee, which put Charles on his back, and he didn't have any success being off of his back. Before the fight, Charles was talking about, oh, does Islam really want to take the best submission artist down to the ground? And in Charles's head, he thought that he was going to be able to submit Islam being off of his back. But that wasn't the case in this fight. He didn't take any big punishment on the ground, but he didn't lock in a lot of submission attempts, and quite frankly, the opportunities weren't there. As soon as Islam was on the ground against Charles, Islam was able to defend a triangle attempt in the beginning of the round, and this was something I was actually correct about. I predicted that Charles wasn't going to be able to submit Islam off of his back, and if you watch the fight back, Charles wasn't able to have anything going off of his back. And it's ironic because I thought that when Islam would feel Charles, that's when Islam would fade. But instead, it ended up being vice versa. So the first round is easily scored for Islam in my opinion, and in round 2, Charles is immediately back under pressure, and Islam would continue to try and look for the counters. Even though he wasn't landing them, he was still finding his moments. And I was so surprised and shocked that Islam was actually able to see these opportunities. And as the round went on, Islam continued to display his dominance in the clinch when Charles would try to take him down, but he couldn't, which put Charles's back up against the fence. The fight then resets in the center of the octagon, and Islam continues to get the better of these striking exchanges. Charles, he tried to use his kicks to try to close distance, but Islam, he had the better footwork in this fight. Islam was very loose and bouncy on his feet, which allowed him to slide out of range and not let Charles continue his offense moving forward. And towards the end of the round, Charles tried to change up his attack by throwing a flying knee. Charles, he tried to close the distance by throwing a flying knee, but the issue was he threw it from kicking range. And again, Islam countered with a beautiful check hook, which sat Oliveira down. And Islam, he immediately jumps on him with an arm triangle choke. And as soon as Islam advanced past the guard, that was all she wrote. And there you go, Islam becomes the lightweight champion of the world, proving everybody that he is the best lightweight in the world, and that he did what he was going to do. Even Khabib said it as well. Islam was going to ride Charles like his horse, and he pretty much did that in the fight. Overall, it was an amazing performance by Islam Makhachev. He won this fight through intelligence, strategy, and using his strengths. He didn't play fire with fire, which is what Oliveira lives in his last few fights. He knew that Oliveira would be the one pressing the action, and instead he used that against Oliveira. He also wasn't bothered by the fact that Oliveira is the best submission artist in UFC history. He knew that his boxing, his clinch game, and his top control were going to give Charles Oliveira problems, and it certainly did. And after this fight ended, there was a lot of criticism on Oliveira's performance, and I get it, the man didn't perform like how he normally performs, but it is not because of Charles Oliveira. It wasn't his fault. It was the man across from him that was the reason why Charles Oliveira couldn't perform the way that he wanted to. Charles Oliveira was a great champion, but Islam was simply the better man on the night. That's just simply what it was. I don't think Charles got any worse. I just think Islam Makhachev was just better on all levels. And now that Islam is the lightweight champion of the world, there are a lot of great potential fights for him in this division. And a fight that fans are calling for right now is for Islam to fight Beneil Dariush, which I think would be an awesome fight. And stylistically, I think Beneil Dariush would be a tough fight for Islam because the wrestling could get neutralized, especially after looking at Benny's last performance. He's one of the few people in this division that can beat Islam. And if we're talking about who should get the next title shot, it should be Benny, but it looks like Islam will be fighting Volk for the #1 pound for pound spot. And some fans, they have voiced their thoughts about this fight, and they prefer for this fight to not happen. But in my opinion, I don't dislike this fight. I think it's a tough fight for Volk, and especially stepping up in weight, it's going to be interesting to see how Volk deals with the size, the strength, and the grappling of Islam. And at the same time, Volk has shown that he's the best featherweight in the world by far, and why he deserves to be pound for pound best. So if the fight goes down, it should be a good fight. And as for Oliveira, he just needs to go back to the drawing board and take some time off because he's been pretty active as a champion. And there's a chance that we could see him rematch people like Poirier, Chandler, or Gaethje to try and get another title shot, which will be fun. And Charles, he does still have ambitions to become a world champion, but it's going to be very tough for him to become champion again because, especially if Islam is still around, it's going to be hard for Oliveira to beat Islam. And my fear is that he could end up as a #1 contender like Max Holloway, Robert Whittaker, and Dustin Poirier. And if that does happen, it will be disappointing because when you look at Charles Oliveira and where he's come from and how his career panned out, he's somebody that deserves to be champion for a really long time. But unfortunately, there's people out there that are better, and you either beat them or you fall short. That's just the reality of it. So hopefully we can see Charles come back better than ever, and hopefully we can see him become champion again. And that is it, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to what I have to say. And let me know, who would you like to see Islam fight for the lightweight title? Do you think Alexander Volkanovski can beat Islam Makhachev? Do you think Charles Oliveira can indeed become champion again? Drop a comment and let me know in the comment section down below. Now, if you guys enjoy content that is related to combat sports, please drop a like on this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel down below. That would be greatly appreciated. And other than that, it's been Steven, signing out. Peace.